Sounds like it's on. We are live and ready to go? All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here today at the first panel of Theorizing the Diaspora. I'm really glad and grateful to be hosted here by the Africana Studies Graduate Student Association. Is that correct? Okay, thank you so much. My name is Moira. I am in the music department, PhD student, and I'll be moderating this panel. We have two speakers today, so it'll be quite relaxed and hopefully not rushing for time too much. We'll have plenty of time for the Q&A as well. Yeah, so I'm going to introduce our first speaker today. It's Aisha Campbell, who is a 2024 graduate of the Humanities Master's Program at York University and an aspiring teacher. Her research is in the areas of Black Canadian studies, sound studies, and geography, with special interest in the quiet, mundane, and ordinary experiences of Black life. And her paper title today is Scarborough, an extended play of sound, stories, and life. So please help me welcome Aisha Campbell.
Morning, morning, everyone. Okay, so my paper that I'll be discussing with you guys today is called Scarborough, an extended play of sound, stories, and life. So Toronto is considered one of the most multicultural cities in the world. However, as the city became more racially diverse in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it also became segregated along compounding racial and socioeconomic lines, made evident by the pockets of mostly racialized immigrants in the underfunded areas of the city, one of those places being Scarborough. Scarborough was no longer the boring middle and upper middle class suburbs known as Scarberia due to being physically and socially on the outskirts of the city center. Originally, it was characterized by post-war suburban development, catering mainly to middle and upper middle class families seeking quiet, spacious neighborhoods on the city's edge. The area's physical separation from downtown Toronto, combined with limited public transit, reinforced its reputation as an isolated, uneventful suburb. However, this image began to shift in the 1970s and 1980s as Scarborough became a focal point for social housing initiatives. City planners identified it as a suitable site for large-scale public housing projects, which led to an influx of lower-income and immigrant populations. Developments like the Scarborough Town Center and the introduction of the rapid transit in 1985 signaled attempts to urbanize and centralize the area. But these changes also coincided with increased government disinvestment and reduced social services compared to downtown Toronto. As a result, Scarborough transitioned from a classic suburb to what urbanists call an inner suburb, a hybrid space marked by both suburban and inner city challenges, including poverty, underfunded infrastructure, and social marginalization. This demographic and socioeconomic shift fueled the emergence of new, often pejorative nicknames such as Scarlum, Scarblackistan, and Scarbage, making Scarborough an infamous Toronto neighborhood steeped in negative stereotypes. We can consider Scarborough being dubbed Scarlum and Scarblackistan colloquially as examples of what Sarah Ahmed calls problematic proximities. Through sound, Ahmed explains that problematic proximities reflect on how racism operates in language through the repetition of associations that get stuck. When listeners hear Scarlum, Scarblackistan, or even Scarberia, the proximity of Scarborough to Harlem, Afghanistan, and Siberia in these nicknames allude to the racialized space that generate negative affect value as a signifier of crisis, death, decay, and decline. Due to, sorry, due to the implicit association of Harlem, Afghanistan, and Siberia with poverty, crime, and danger. These colloquial nicknames for Scarborough sonically reproduce racist, classist, and xenophobic associations that are harmful to the place and people of Scarborough. They communicate and repeat negative ideas about Scarborough that inform the public's perception about this place, suggesting a sense of otherness and un-Canadianness, linguistically tying Scarborough to infamous urban locales globally that often conjure negative value. In defiance of the insidious and malicious nature of these designations, Scarbarians have reclaimed those sounds and used these names with pride, as they have embraced and fostered a counter knowledge of themselves and this place to disrupt what the sonic color line attempts to reinforce. The visual alone can often limit us to surface level understanding, reinforcing power dynamics within a country that promotes colorblind politics and tokenism. I argue Scarborough cannot be captured holistically without the acknowledgement and exploration of Scarborough sounds, as listening to the community's sounds allows us to register facets of Scarborough life that go undetected. You may ask, what constitutes Scarborough sound? It is the sound of the bus as it passes by the TTC, the TT voice calling out stops, Kennedy, Midland, McCowan. It is the kiss teeth that accompanies an eye roll. It is the static hip hop music from the guy with no headphones. It is the sporadic fam coming from the group of teenagers walking to Malvern Mall on their lunch break. It is the cacophony of languages in the STC food court. It is the calypso, soca, reggae playing down the Nielsen Road during Kitty Carnival. It is the side eye that speaks volume without a single word uttered. It is the rush of the Rouge River against the logs and rocks that make a home in its waters. It is the hafashah that follows the first bite of a too hot patty from Patty Time on Lawrence. It is the silence of the decommissioned Scarborough RT. It is the voices of mans, mandems, sweetermans, bodman, wastemans, and starboys, blazing pinpricks in the celestial sphere. Although these sounds are often taken for granted, the orality of the quotidian, the ordinary, the everyday capture the nuances of the interior of the diasporic life in this complex geography. My work turns to the field of sound My work turns to the field of sound studies for conceptual tools and approaches to reveal how these communities redefine, transform, and register Scarborough as a dynamic place that allows us to know ourselves and each other, the ways we invent to know ourselves and each other, all while surviving methods and disciplines that absent us. I ground my interdisciplinary sound and literature studies project in a Black queer feminist lens to explore the following questions. How does the intersection of sound and literature map Scarborough landscapes differently? What is made audible by Scarborough literature that is otherwise ignored and dismissed in dominant discourses regionally and nationally? How does attuning ourselves to hear sound in literature open Scarborough up to alternative understandings and possibilities of diasporic communities? The intersection of sound and literature moves beyond description, but rather adds depth and breadth to diasporic stories through insight to the interiority and texture of Black and racialized lives. The exploration of sound in race and geography is heavily present within the works of Black writers and scholars like W.E.B. Du Bois, Zora Neale Hurston, Ralph Ellison, James Baldwin, and Toni Morrison, who have all been widely recognized as noisy authors who sound Black culture, producing speakerly prose, or incorporating Black music into their work. Sound and literature has enriched readers' understanding of Black, Indigenous, and racialized practices of resistance and liberation through alternative narrative structures, i.e., poetry, short stories, spoken word, and speeches, and aesthetic practices. Continuing in the tradition, much of the literature coming out of and about Scarborough take up these practices in sounding the interiority and texture of this suburban cosmopolitan place. I turned to Catherine Hernandez's novel Scarborough, David Cheriandi's novel Brother, poems from Natasha Rumatar's Bittersweet, and selections from Adrienne de Leon, Tia Montangi and Natasha Rumator's Feel Ways, a Scarborough anthology, to explore the intersection of sound and power in Scarborough by interrogating the ways we listen, how we listen, why we listen, and who we listen to register the oral dynamics of Scarborough that are overlooked, misunderstood, taken for granted, or often excluded from dominant discourses in Canadian literary canon. Dylan Robinson explains that listening is an act/practice that is influenced by the positions we occupy in this world, as listening is an intersection of perceptual habit, ability, and bias. Imperial white supremacist capitalist patriarchy influences our positionalities as it shapes the way we listen, how we listen, what we think listening is, and who/what we listen to. Jennifer Lynn Stover's work makes clear the degree to which our listening practices are far from neutral. The listening ear drives the sonic color line. It is a figure for how dominant listening practices accrue and change over time, as well as a descriptor for how the dominant culture exerts pressure on individual listening practices to conform to the sonic color line norms. Through the listening ear, surveillance, discipline, and interpretation, certain associations between race and sound come to seem normal, natural, and right. The listening ear manifests what Robinson calls hungry listening. Hungry listening renders listening as a process of the ear rather than of the body, tolerating only a modicum of difference as long as it remains palatable to Western aesthetics, and ultimately reifying the status quo by what is acknowledged as a sound and what is deemed as unintelligible noise. Both Stover's and Robinson's work exposes the oral layer to Foucault's concept of biopower, as it reveals the ways in which the listening ear and hungry listening fosters life for a select few and disallow it to the point of death for a mass majority, because how we hear race has long been a matter of life and death. Under these persisting colonial systems, those deemed other are expected to not only struggle, labor, and die, but to do so silently. To be silenced, to go unheard, or are components of this disablement of life that Foucault describes, and these racialized listening practices contribute to enduring social inequality. Shifting away from theory, I'll move on to close readings of the focal text demonstrating 3 ways of listening to literature. One of the ways is the violence and dispossession we Black, Indigenous, and racialized people experience as a result of hungry listening. The second is the sonic underground / detour of listening differently. And third is the quotidian. Due to time constraints, we may not get to some of these. Okay, so hungry listening. Part 1 of Catherine Hernandez's novel, Scarborough, opens with a frustrating, heartbreaking, and rage-inducing scene between an Indigenous family seeking medical advice and a patronizing doctor. In observing her toddler son's interactions and behaviors, Marie Baudin suspects that Johnny could be autistic and takes him to the doctor for a professional opinion. Instead of being met with care, undivided attention, and a level of seriousness that should be extolled at any health consultation, Marie is met with inattentiveness, condescension, and complete disregard. Marie's experience resonates with Jamila Malika Abu Bakar's articulations of the failures of visuality. I am a Black woman. Upon sight, my body is marked by your memory, your imagination, your understanding, or lack thereof, of my fitting or not fitting. A racialized gender pre/misconception. My shade and features are pathologized, and I am replete with history plus today's news, haunted and haunting. I'm hyper/invisible. Even as a Black child, I sense this. The doctor's visual perception and the colonial histories and narratives that come with it rendered the Micmac woman and her family inaudible to him, demonstrating that the hyper-visible and invisibilizing processes of racism, misogyny, and colonialism are happening sonically as they are visually. And like Abu Bakr, as a child, Sylvie Marie's daughter could sense the othering occurring in the doctor's office and expresses how it was too painful to watch her mother being ignored at this appointment. Ooh. Uh, Okay. The doctor's assessment and subsequent advice was filled with microaggressions and very little help as they were coming from a position of superiority and expert knows best mentality and practice. My advice was to deal with one thing at a time. The doctor was already standing with one hand at the doorknob. There's a lot of back and forth with specialists, a lot of booking appointments, phone calls, trips across town. Think about dealing with all of that in addition to what you're dealing with now. Besides, I have a strong feeling he's just a bit behind. Nothing to worry about. The entire time, Mama begged for a referral and for nothing. This scene from Scarborough provides a clear example of hungry listening, as the doctor not only ignored but outright refutes Marie's concerns while providing her with inadequate next steps. As Stover explains, through the listening ear, surveillance, discipline, and interpretation, certain associations between race, sound come to seem normal, natural, and right. And so, through the listening ear, the doctor's silencing and dismissal of Marie's concerns are deemed appropriate based on her race, class, and gender. Marie's encounter with the doctor highlights the influence of orality in health outcomes. In the article, Listening Fields, Abu Bakr quotes the founder of the Me Too movement, Tarana Burke, who says, "If you can't hear me, I feel like you can't see me. If you can't hear me, I think you can't see me. I'm not thinking you can see me because you can't hear me. It doesn't feel like you can be seen if you can't be heard." While discussing systems of oppression on professor and storyteller Brene Brown's podcast, Burke's words illuminate the sonic process of visibility and how the doctor's refusal to hear Marie was a refusal to see her, influenced largely by the fact that he did not see her as a person worth listening to, a violent cycle he did not step up to break but reinforced. The sonic underground slash detour. Just as the sonic can be control, just as the sonic can control, confine, and constrict, it also has transformative and emancipatory capabilities. It is a matter of attuning to a different frequency or frequencies. I argue that the sonic properties within Scarborough literature subvert dominant discourses and national narratives of race, place, and belonging through counter knowledge, or what Ginsberg refers to as counter sounds. Counter sounds consist of uncomfortable tones or the strategic silences and vocalizations of the complexities of the diasporic subject. Though these counter sounds disrupt dominant structures of sonic modernity and open a discursive space for countercultural and counterpublic poetics. Whether in print, in a live reading, or through recorded performance, a decolonizing poetics can be expressed through the struggle between dominant sonic structures and the rebellious sound that attempt to reshape them. Mecca Jamila Sullivan, in conversation with Carter Mathis, explains that resistant orality allows for a vocalization of Black fugitive resistance that can diagnose and disrupt the links between white supremacy and ideas of American law, order, and domestic security, and fathom a Blackness beyond the racial logics of state. Sullivan and Mathis highlight the ways in which sound has historically been a method for Black people to participate in discourse when many other traditional methods like reading and writing have been closed off to them. Similarly, with other colonized people, this sonic tools of subversion and amplification do not become discarded once the excluded receive a semblance of inclusion, but instead these sonic methods are woven into Scarborough literature, poetry, memoir, music, film to transform, reimagine, and make anew. In the short story Champions from Scarborough anthology Fieldways, Adam Ashapong writes, "Our movements were bold and proud. We danced as if no one and everyone was watching. The music was medicine to our wounded self-esteem, our broken hearts, and tired bodies. We took our hands to the vents which hung dangerously low above our heads and banged against them in agreement to Bougier's words. We walked like champions, moved like champions. We felt the rhythm like champions. At each and every big bashment party, we were all champions." As a Scarborough kid growing up in the early 2000s, both the visual and orality of Ashapong's scene is a vivid recall to Sean Paul's music video, Get Busy. The dancing and embodiment of the music, the gathering and freely taking up space, are all markers of Black joy and free expression in Sean Paul's video and in this short story. Ashapong's scene is an example of resistant orality by the mere fact that these imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal systems were not meant for Black people to live and prosper under, but to struggle, labor, and die. Caribbean historian Rachel Grace Newman further explains that this is why Black life, Black prosperity, Black creativity, Black joy are miraculous and divine. Because they continue to take place under genocidal systems that consistently seek to destroy. The bold and proud movements, that loud bang on the vents, the empowering music, the taking up space, making noise in Ashapong's stories are miraculous and divine. A vital component of white supremacy is the demeaning denial and erasure of Black and Indigenous histories. Hence why Ashapong's sonic articulations are resistant orality, because they are sonic and literary accounting of Black Caribbean history here in Scarborough. According to I'm almost done. According to Cheryl Thompson, these bashment parties were a sonic site of community and culture that arose out of the lack of gathering places for Caribbean communities, leaving Toronto's downtown core for the sprawling subdivision of Scarborough. As mentioned earlier, Scarborough was predominantly white area prior to the was a predominantly white area prior to the influx of Black, Brown, and Asian people in the 1980s. And so those making the internal migration were faced with pervasive racism and discrimination, but also a dearth of places to gather and enjoy their music and culture, which was primarily reggae and calypso, which became soca in the 1990s. But in the spirit of adaptability, or what Dr. Andrea Davis would call flexibility, Caribbean people in Scarborough turned their basements of their homes into community hubs and spaces for Caribbean culture, after traditional avenues were not available to them. Speaking to the ways in which sound is not just oral, but spatial, that sound is a space and place making as seen with the basement bashment parties. Building on Mathis's work, Sullivan points to his concept of the sonic underground as the space where Blackness goes to create its own freedom and can sound out stories of the possible in spite of a nation state shaped by racist narratives. Um, okay, just 2 more slides, guys. I'm so sorry. Yeah. So Mathis and Sullivan's work with the Sonic Underground resonate with Ronaldo Walcart's conceptualization of music and literature as a detour. He explains that these sonic and literary detours are a framework which we can think through, account for, and understand the contrasts and continuities that occur within Black diasporas. Moreover, these detours are also an in-between space in which Black diasporic cultures reside. Walcott states that detours are the unacknowledged roots of Black expressive cultures and gestures directly to the rhizomatic nature. And so these Scarborough bashment parties and the literature about them are manifestations from the sonic underground, serving as detours from the imperial national narratives, making room for new knowings, new connections, new understandings, new beginnings, and new beings. This is the final slide. Okay. So while there is much more to discuss, this paper experiments with different listening practices to comprehend the nuanced textures of Scarborough's wailing manifesto, to actively challenge colonial modes of listening to register Scarborough otherwise. While the Scarborough text taken up in this talk emphasize the ways in which colonial sounds practices produce marginalization, disconnection, and isolation processes here in Canada, the literature also registers the counter sounds, resistant orality, and sonic detours that occurs in Scarborough, unsettling listening to places that, like the barbershop, Rouge Valley, and the basement bashments, where different styles and kinships were possible. You found new language, you caught the gesture, you kept the meanings close as skin. Despite the violence, silence, and grief permeating in Scarborough because of the dispossession residents experience, the literature alternately registers the textures of Black, Indigenous, and racialized lives in Scarborough. The literature uses sound and sonic practices to register beyond the reductive, one dimensional narrative prescribed to Scarborough and its residents and attune us to how we are known to ourselves and each other, the ways we invent to know ourselves and each other, all while surviving methods and disciplines that absent us. Barometer's Bittersweet speaks life into the east and suburb in poems like Meadowville, where she writes, "These streets are yours. They have always been yours, with the dark cracks running up like veins along the H cement, with the blinking bulbs keeping you in their line of sight." Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful paper, Aisha. Second speaker for today, and the last speaker on this panel, Airwaves and Afterlives, will be on Zoom. So I'm just waiting for Vincente to set up. There you are, and to share your presentation. And I'll introduce you while you do that. So Vicente Perez is a poet and scholar working at the intersection of poetry, hip hop, and digital culture. He analyzes anti-Blackness as the structure of civil society and explores sound and Black creative expression as modes of communicating the incommunicable nature of anti-Blackness. He is currently a PhD candidate in performing studies and a dissertation fellow at UC Berkeley. He holds a BA in anthropology and comparative race and ethnic studies from the University of Chicago. He was a Lyman Fellow in New Media and a Race and Digital Justice Fellow at the Center on Race and Justice. His debut poetry chapbook, Other Stories to Tell Ourselves from 2023, won an Eric Hoffer Finalist Award. His poems and research have appeared in Association of Internet Researchers, Decipher, Black Notes on Culture and Criticism, Obsidian, BAM-PFA, and more is forthcoming. So please join me in welcoming Vincente as he will talk about Dochi's boom bap in his paper, You Know Exactly What It Is.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Can I get like a thumbs up or anything if things working? Thank you so much. I'm really, really excited to be here. I had a little bit of an emergency, but we're all here. And I feel like it might be an interesting thing to kind of hear my voice kind of circulating this space as like an activation of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So my name is Vincente Perez. I'm really excited for this like absolutely incredible panel, Airwaves and Afterlives, Black feminist listening practices across radio, literature, and performance. I'm just going to kind of give a little bit of an overview of my dissertation that this work is a part of, and then jump right into the paper. And so I really wanted to talk about my dissertation, Sonic Blackness, Hip Hop Poetics, because it's in deep conversation with not only the previous panelists, an incredible presentation, but also it seems like this entire sound symposium. So I'm excited. So, in my dissertation, Sonic Blackness, Hip Hop Poetics, I read poets and rappers as sound theorists, sonic practitioners. And I'm kind of arguing that because they're sonic practitioners, they are actually sounding Blackness through performance and outside of the dictates of liberal humanism. I believe that rappers and poets are sounding Blackness in this way because it is to counter the logocentric nature of Western modernity. And so this kind of practice, as we kind of heard from the previous panelists, is a long tradition, and it is specifically about escaping and evading capture in the visual register. And so I believe that these practices are very intentional and have a kind of deep purpose beneath them. So we're going to get into that. And so the ultimate argument is that because I write on anti-Blackness, it's that anti-Blackness is far more than just, being mean to Black people, racism that happens to Black people. It's actually a structure of the modern world of civil society itself. And so I think a lot of the work that Dochi is doing, it's important to acknowledge all of the various parts of her identity that turn her sonic praxis into a more complicated and deep engagement with challenging the logocentric nature of Western modernity. And so, just to give a little overview, who is Doechii? That's kind of a ridiculous question in 2025, I would argue, but it's really important to provide some introductions. So, Doechii, born Jayla Hickman, is a multi-talented rapper, singer, songwriter, many other things. Born in Tampa, Florida, she had many creative talents. And although she had begun to make music professionally in around 2020, she actually quickly rose to fame in 2023 following the release of the song What It Is, who, a lot of folks may remember this song. It was her first song to chart on the Billboard's Top 100. After this time, she signs with TDE, Top Dog Entertainment, the label known for acts such as Kendrick Lamar, SZA, J-Rock, and many more. And she began working on her mixtape, Alligator Bites Don't Heal, which featured the song that we're going to focus on today, Boom Bap. So this project, Alligator Bites Don't Heal, is her longest and most complete project thus far. It won the incredible feat of Best Rap Album in 2025 and also garnered multiple awards since that time. As she tours for the album, a lot of fans got their first-hand experience of her multifaceted and talented approach to music. On her background as a listener and a student of sound, Doechii reflects, "This tour was an immense amount of personal growth for me this year. I did a lot of studying myself, being a student of hip hop, which you can see reflected in some of the academia looks that I wore on the tour." And so, if you know about a lot of the ways she dressed for this tour, thinking about like black preppiness, it's actually an intentional choice meant to show her studious nature that she's a student of hip hop. She says, "I'm forever changing, so I would have to say that my style is eclectic, but always cunt. If you know, you know." I will come back to her own discussion of the notion, if you know, you know, but it's important to frame the surrounding background before boom bap enters the scene. She has made songs that have pop, house, and R&B vibes, prompting many to criticize her erratic and varying approaches to sound. The industry fans and critics were convinced that Doechii was not properly following the trend that popular rap stars gain success with. The product, her music, wasn't stable, and the brand was constantly shifting, prompting many to call for her to abandon the singy pop stuff and get back to real rap. Boom bap is her direct response to these haters.
Boom bap, rap.
So, are folks still with me? Perfect. So, to transition really quickly, I'm arguing that we need to be thinking about the way that misogynoir circulates as hip hop culture itself. And so this is one of the main arguments in many the chapters in my dissertation. I'm building on forthcoming work and writing on Black women rappers. I'm really trying to figure out why is it that so much of what sounds like hip hop is actually just misogynoir. And so many fans and cultural critics refuse to acknowledge the unequal footing on which Black male rappers and Black female rappers are operating. I seek to move conversations away from questions of good or bad representation of Black women and instead push us to consider how misogynoir is a structural force that seeps into all aspects of hip hop. Rather than focus on the limited sample of Black women rappers who have made it nonetheless, I seek to explore the way that misogynoir drives the libidinal economy of hip hop. So misogynoir is a libidinal force that drives hip hop fan culture from the music blogs online to the party scenes itself. I work within the definition of misogynoir that Moya Bailey has outlined and argue that misogynoir haunts the industry and the culture of hip hop itself. Misogynoir leveled at Black women rappers seeps into the sonic register because fans don't want to hear anything else Black women rappers have to offer and refuse to grant them the freedom to explore other genres enjoyed by Black male rappers. So here you see the more comprehensive definition that misogynoir is the anti-Black racist misogyny that Black women experience. Misogynoir describes the uniquely co-constitutive racialized and sexist violence that befalls Black women as a result of their simultaneous and interlocking oppression at the intersection of racial and gender marginalization. And so what happens in hip hop is that black women rappers really have to cater to the black male gaze. This actually happens through the process of pigeonholing. And so hip hop fans expect to hear music that caters to a notion of real hip hop, or what Regina Bradley has called black masculine cool, which creates a unique pigeonholing effect. Black women rappers are expected to operate within a binary of either conscious rap or ratchet rap, which both appeal to the male gaze and make them wholly subject to the politics of respectability. These categories are a double-edged sword. The label conscious attempts to sever black women from their own pleasure and their capacity to use rap as a form of erotic and sonic play. Additionally, black women rappers who opt to perform ratchet rap are accused of hypersexuality, which renders them available to harm without protection. The fact that many fans seem to want to pigeon black women's sonic hip hop culture as either conscious or ratchet rap minimizes the labor that black women rappers put into their cultural work and tends to render their work as less valuable and less interesting than their male contemporaries. This creates an impossible situation where black women rappers are discredited no matter which decision they decide to make. They are either accused of using their sexuality to take advantage of men and not taking seriously as artists, or she, the female rapper, is expected to abandon her desire for pleasure and perform a desexualized persona to be considered real hip hop, which I argue is a fannish investment and preoccupation with only certain representations of the cultural form of hip hop. Black male rappers can do any form of rap and be considered real hip hop, while black women continue to have their cultural labor stalled by notions of authenticity and cultural value that are misogynistic at best and downright violent and hateful at worst. These preferences and tropes create an oral imaginary, and this is Roshanek Keshti in 2011, where black masculine cool and misogynoir are socially reproduced as fan engagement itself, and black women rappers become pigeonholed in these fan expectations. I want us to think about the libidinal economy and move away from other descriptions of things like rights and humanity, because I believe that the libidinal economy is the perfect way to explore the way Blackness is not just consumed, but also highly fetishized in the listening economy, the attention economy, and the way that these things circulate on the internet. And so, for more on the libidinal economy, I would suggest the originator of the term, Lyotard, as well as reading Andre Broxworth with the term, and also Frank Walderson. So, when considering racial formation in the United States, it is crucial to clarify how the transatlantic slave system continues to haunt the present experience of race, gender, and sexuation. Black females have historically been labeled as sexually aggressive, masculinized, and ungendered, and this is Spillers, and other misogynistic ideas that suggest that black females cannot be harmed or raped or attain the protected status that society automatically grants to white women. For more on this, you can read Moynihan, Hartman, and Jackson, 2020. Excuse me. As Black feminists have urged us to consider since the 1970s, normative sexual politics leave Black female sexual agency under-theorized at best, or in many cases, completely ignored. In Black Looks, 1992, Hooks devotes an entire chapter to the link between objectifying Black women via certain things, synecdoche, and the way that these misogynistic assumptions impact the entire cultural marketplace. She writes, "This is certainly the challenge facing Black women, who must confront the old painful representations of our sexuality as a burden we must suffer, representations still haunting the present. We must take we must make the oppositional space where our sexuality can be named and represented, where we are sexual subjects no longer bound and trapped." Hook's work resonates in the present because her scholarship continuously positioned the Black woman as a central figure worthy of scholarly attention and consideration. She performed and enacted Black feminism by bearing down on the mundane ways that racism and misogyny harms Black women. I believe that this is an early argument that the cultural market, i.e., the libidinal economy, can have tangible impacts on the way that a media object is taken up in popular culture by those who sell and circulate it, as well as the fans who buy it and create affective relationships with the media objects themselves. Later on in this chapter, Hooks writes, the overriding fear is that cultural, ethnic, and racial differences will be continually commodified and offered up as new dishes to enhance the white palate, that the other will be eaten, consumed, and forgotten. And so I want to think about the way that Dochi is engaged in what I call Black feminist direct address. And this process is a political practice, a way of in imbuing sound with an analysis itself, using sound as a form of critique to escape the way that the visual locks the Black subject into its frame, as well as the way that the page tries to lock the Black poet and Black rapper into their meaning. So Boom Bap is a sonic performance of Black feminist direct address, where Doechii refuses to let misogynoir and masculinist standards disrupt her ability to do music however she pleases. Doechii uses exclamations like, I'm everything, and you know exactly what it is, to disturb audience expectations and expose the restrictive tropes that undergird both fanish and industry-specific critiques. For example, despite the song being a single for her album, the song abandons many traditional elements of hip-hop singles, namely an idiosyncratic delivery style complete with partial phrases, self-interruptions, blowing raspberries, as well as auto-tune vocals and glossolalia, which, is speaking tongues, effects that seem to distort rather than enhance the listening experience. She says, you want real rap from a bitch, like y'all out rapping a bitch. You know exactly what it is. This is a direct retort to the disingenuous engagement she receives from fans, critics, and other listeners who refuse to understand her work as spanning multiple genres. Her talent is obviously meant to be fixed and put into a box, and she points out the confines of that box while also destroying the mold itself with her delivery. You know exactly what it is also a refrain, a central motif in her work where she harkens to her 2023 single What It Is, this pop R&B song that gained her a lot of fame. Again, you know exactly what it is. And what it is, Doechii interpolates a refrain from a raunchy 2004 hit, Some Cut, which features an emblematic example of black male rappers' ability to perform their sexuality. Regina Bradley terms this process hip hop sonic cool pose. It's raunchy, very explicit, and was on the radio. It had to have its own radio edit, if you remember it. I want to be thinking about this interpolation to this hit from 2004 in her single in 2023, and how she repeats this again in 2024 to engage in a critique. Within this kind of argument, there is a suggestion that we need to be thinking about not only about media, but the way that it circulates and the way that repeat listens challenge property value. And so we're thinking about ontology here and not just the object existing on its own. I believe that Doechii is refusing to allow her listener to be obtuse and revealing that the underlying premise of this confusion serves a structural purpose. This is, again, her refusing to let misogynoir circulate undisturbed. I believe that this is an example of Doechii engaging in the Black radical vernacular. On the topic of the Black radical vernacular and on knowledge and Black death, Zora Neale Hurston writes, we Negroes in Eatonville know a number of things that the hustling, bustling white man never dreams of. He is a materialist with little care for overtones. They have only eyes and ears. We see with the skin. And later on, she says, but the Negro knew exactly, knew instantly. And the white folks never knew and would have laughed hard at anyone who told them. He who only sees with his eyes is very blind. Within this discussion, I'm drawing on Jonah Hurston's idea of knowledge and Black knowledge specifically to talk about the ways that white knowledge tends to trap the Black subject and what they want to mean into their own ideas. This is an example of the Black radical vernacular. I believe that Black women have been improvisational musicians engaging in revolutionary sonic practice for a long time. And I'm building on Brooks, who argues that Black creatives in general and Black feminist modernity specifically, that Black feminist rappers and singers actually perform what's called affective technology. So Doechii is intervening in the listening process via sound and is offering a radical alternative for her fans and many others. Doechii refuses to let her work circulate in a misogynistic way and instead provides another way of hearing, reading, and theorizing, making the modern. In liner notes to Revolution, Brooks outlines how Black women have been these improvisational revolutionary practitioners for a long time, from Esther May Scott to Solange, because they've been able to, through their listening, reframe archaic philosophies of the self born out of high Enlightenment thought that never had them in mind. I believe that Doechii is a contemporary example of this Black woman improvisational musician, and she engages in sonic curation as a form of performance labor. I draw heavily on this idea of Black woman sonic culture because this framework clarifies that the stakes of Doechii's Black feminist direct address. It is a sonic praxis, for it sees Black women rappers as cultural workers engaged in a labor of care. This praxis is taken seriously as work, and those who are kept on the margins are allowed to move into a different way and represent themselves in their own terms. As Doechii says, you know exactly what it is. She's very clear that she is everything. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Vincente, for that wonderful paper. At the end of this panel, we have a Q&A session. I believe in order for people to be properly heard for the Q&A, we need them to speak into the mic. Is that going to be our Q&A mic, I think? Okay, great. Yeah, so think of your questions and come up to the mic in order to share them with us. I can also start with the first question for our panelists. I think it was really interesting how both of you pointed out the ways in which Black artists are developing some sort of like radical alternative to these like really deeply structural forms of oppression. But Aisha was talking about literature, whereas Vincente was talking about sort of resisting the logocentric view of Western modernity. And so I wondered if both of you could speak maybe a little bit on maybe that tension between sound and word or sound and text in that possibility for resistance. Either of you can go first. But.
Yeah, so I guess when I was working on my major research project, when you think of sound, you don't really think about literature, but just in my research, like I read another person's master's thesis. I don't remember their name right on the top of my head, but they were basically talking about how literature is the new griot and how like this is a new form of like storytelling and sharing stories. So that kind of brought that connection for me on how like literature is a form of sound and how it's not just like the text on the page, that there is some sound making happening there.
You,
I don't know, Vincente, if you had anything to add.
yeah, I did. Thank you so much for your response, Aisha. Yeah, we were in really deep conversation. Thank you so much for your presentation. I think I came to this connection between literature and sound through my work as a spoken word poet. I kind of found that as I was engaging in my work, spoken word poets, and this is like probably the second book, but spoken word poets had these things called chapbooks. And so as you're kind of performing on, if you can get into like the college circuit, you're presenting your work, you're a slam poet, you're performing your work, and that's where you earn your money. You sometimes needed a physical book to be able to sell and just kind of like get you some gas money back when you could buy gas for, $2 or $3. And so I started to think about the way that the page was constricting a lot of the work. And so my work wasn't translating to the page very well. I wasn't getting published as a slam and performance poet. And so as I started my dissertation project, I started to realize that this process where the page wasn't properly able to capture a lot of Black speech patterns in poetry, this was also happening in hip hop. I was looking at the lyric pages and there was terrible descriptions of what things meant because we weren't talking about the ad libs as contributing to the meaning, and we weren't thinking about the ways that language and speech was actually not capturing what these rappers were saying and performing in their work. And so that really brought me to the idea that meaning is only about what could be said or uttered. This is like Western Enlightenment thinking. This is the kind of pinnacle of white modernity deciding that the only thing that matters is what has been written down in text. And so, because of this issue with the humanistic studies and humanistic frameworks, I decided that rappers and poets shouldn't be only understood within these frameworks. And so I decided to listen for what resonates outside of humanism, outside of liberal humanism, and I wanted to see what silences are tangible, what forms of social life are still present in the midst of living social death. And this is where I started to kind of engage my research to think with the non-human, because if humanity is predicated on denying and foreclosing Black people from ever having this experience of humanity, then how can this framework help understand what meanings come from Black creative expression? So that was the big question that I was trying to figure out in my dissertation.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for that response. Other people with questions, yes, please come up.
Questions for Aisha. So I want you to talk a little bit about the Sonic Underground. So I'm from Toronto too, but I'm from the other side, the West End. And so the only times that I've experienced the bashment was in Scarborough. So our parties are like in apartments, bars, restaurants, like as like growing up. And especially my neighborhood's close proximity to Little Jamaica. And so a lot of that historic Caribbean community has left to like Brampton, Mississauga, like further out. So like in Scarborough, what's the state of the bashment now? Like, is that Sonic Underground still there? Because it was like that. It was like that Sean Paul video. It was exactly like that, and it was beautiful. It's like these big like basements, and you're hitting on the heaters and everything like that. Do they still exist? Because I know that Ajax is close proximity to Scarborough, and they have the largest Black population in Canada. I think it's like 23, 27%. Like, so is it still there, or is it like, do you find abashments out in places like Ajax or Pickering?
Yeah, we're losing recipes. No, so like the same kind of migration that was happening out of Little Jamaica was also happening out of Scarborough. So a lot of Black people and Caribbean people were moving out of Scarborough to Ajax. So I feel like now we don't really have like the same bashment like parties. I think it's kind of also with regards to impacted by COVID as well. Like I feel like now we're kind of losing those third places, even though we still have some like small bars like Twilight still where you can still have some parties and stuff. But yeah, no, I think we have to bring them back.
Okay, wonderful questions. other questions from the audience? Yes, please come up to the mic.
Yes, thank y'all so much for your presentations. They were really wonderful. And it's actually these two questions before which kind of shaped. I think you all are speaking to something together, but it also diverges a little. So I'm curious to think about the ways in which you all are thinking of Black sound within region. So if we're talking Scarborough, and then I'm thinking Dochi, I mean, she reps the swamp. I'm thinking Tampa, but that of course has distinctive histories, but the way in which you all are kind of excavating and you're thinking about a theorization of sound and what it's doing specifically against empire, I think they share that commonality with your work too. I guess, how do you see them region? How do you see it transcending region in that way?
Aisha says Vicente can go first.
Yeah, thank you. What a great question. I think that there's a really great quote by Luis Chud Soke, who says that music can be claimed, but sound cannot be owned. And I think a lot about this in my work because the larger kind of argument in my dissertation is that social death is a framework to understand the kind of meanings that come from Black sound. And so again, if we're thinking about the ways that the visual and the you know in literature and text, the way that it traps the Black subject into a white understandings of meaning, life, humanity, I wanted to look at the frameworks that help explore sounds that escaped that were existing outside of that. And so I think that sound is one of those things that cannot be like properly contained. And so even if you have a regional influence, because it's a kind of Black diasporic practice, it's kind of this idea of like the glocal where it can be local and then it can be global as well. And so sound has this ability because the kind of circulation, the economy is quite different for sound than it is for literature and physical books. Physical items often have to follow a lot of the trade routes that, you know, have long, disgusting histories connected to the transatlantic slave system and many other things. With sound, there is a kind of a fanish exploration of saturation, thinking about you know, when the radio was a little bit more of a popular phenomenon, you would have the sound circulating the Billboard 100. If it wasn't, you know, as popular, what you had instead was you could go down the street and hear your music being played. And so this is the ideas that I'm trying to look at, the way that sound circulates differently, the way sound circulates in things like mixtapes versus albums, the way that the digital and streaming economy is challenging the idea of the media object itself. And so I think sound is one of those things that can be transported around the world in a far different way than physical objects. And I think that that's an intentional practice. And I want to think about rappers and poets as sonic practitioners to open them up to that kind of analysis.
Wonderful. Aisha, do you have something to add?
Yeah. So Scarborough is very unique. Well, Toronto is very unique where it's like it is a very it's a diasporic place. So the sound that is coming out of Scarborough is local and also from elsewhere. And that's kind of what Ronaldo Walcott talks about with the detours and sound being the connection of that in-between place. So yeah, so I see how like yeah, how Black diasporic peoples in Scarborough and in Toronto like use sound to connect to make home in this place that doesn't really see them as Canadian or doesn't really view them as a part of this nation, or and then also connecting to elsewhere, is connecting to, I guess, back home, and then also reaching out to other places and creating community that way.
Yeah, wonderful. And a great question, I think, to let us think also about how these two papers for today might also speak to our own work and things that we do. Further questions from the audience? yeah, step up to the mic if you have any questions. Don't be shy.
Hello. Thank you both for your wonderful talks. My question is for
Vincente? Vincente?
Vincente. I would ask you this one-on-one if we were in person, but we're not, so I'm just gonna ask it now. When I hear boom bap, I hear a lot of conversation and dialogue with Kendrick's Untitled Unmastered. And I wonder, especially because she's on TDE, if you have any thoughts about how this sort of calling of this specific sort of presentation from him back in whenever it was released is also speaking towards misogynoir as well.
Yeah, I think that what a great question. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry I'm not there because we could talk for hours probably about this. Yeah, I tried to get to this with my discussion of the way that what it is interpolates some cut, right? And so within Dochi's describing her own work. She did this academic preppy black look because she wants everyone to know that she's a deep listener and a student of hip hop. And so this interpolation process, this idea of taking a sound, sampling it, reusing it in another moment, this is what I'm arguing is sonic blackness. And so my dissertation is arguing that like rappers and poets are sounding blackness out in this way, and this is a long tradition. You know, I mentioned Zona Hurston. Somebody was talking about Doechii having like a swamp sound, reps the swamp, and then she moves to the West Coast, right? Like these are all examples of resonations and reverberations that maybe aren't going to be truly heard unless we listen for them deeply. And so, like, the question of misogynoir comes up because like why does she have to ask him to get on the phones? I mean, like this is kind of this the reason why I'm talking about misogynoir as obtuseness is because like a lot of people will literally challenge black women to like deny like will just in their face be like I'm gaslighting you, you're not really experiencing this problem, right? So to be like say like no, like get him on the phone, I want to be doing this music, this is real rap, blowing raspberries, like directly addressing the haters and the critics. Like this is challenging misogynoir because black men have no problem being able to use direct address. They can call anyone anything on a track. They can engage in, you know, rap beefs and no one has a problem with what they say about, you know, such and such. And so I think what is important is to remember that Doechii has freedom and she could have chosen to write a speech, but instead she chose to sonically make this critique and directly address her fans as well as the critics who refuse to let her do music how she pleases. And she keeps saying things like, I'm everything, you know, get top on the phone, like interpolating these ideas because, again, this is a critique of the industry itself. It's not just the fans who are producing this issue, it's also the music execs. It's also the black music execs. It's also the black men in the industry that are also trying to put black women into this binary of either ratchet rap or conscious rap. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Wonderful. We have time for one more question, or is it time to wrap up? Looking at the organization. 2 minutes, so quick question. I have like a really quick question, maybe. Do you happen to know, Aisha, if Doechii is being listened to in Scarborough? Is it resonating there? Just trying to see if there might be like a connection here between those two papers.
Um, like she says, she's everything. Yeah, Scarborough is listening to Doechii. Like, yeah.
So no special like resonance or
Like, I feel like one thing about Toronto or like Scarborough in particular, we definitely do have our, like, we're going through like a renaissance where like a lot of art is coming out of Scarborough where it wasn't expected. And so I think there is appreciation for the art that Doechii is doing and like see like sees likes, real recognizes real. And so I think that there's that appreciation. Yeah.
Unless anyone else has a really burning question. No? Okay, then I want to thank you all for being here today. I welcome you to step out into the lobby as the next panel gets set up. I think there's also a liner notes activity that's happening. So is it on the wall, that big paper? So please write down your questions or observations or things that you took away to sort of create this collaborative memory of the conference. But thank you all for being here today, and let's applaud Aisha and Vincente one more time.